Hi, I'm Ross Cavett in the Cobb TV studios with Chairman Mike Boyce, and it's our first chat of 2018, and
Yes.
already just a few days in, it's been an interesting year.
Yes, well, as you know, I was supposed to give my State of the County address on Monday, but the weather conditions forced a postponement, and so this week's video was going to be that State of the County address. But there's some, again, we had our first day meeting today, and we passed 2 agenda items. We're going to acquire 2 new parks properties. And so we're that's a great way to start the year. And all I can say is that we have some other properties that we have under contract right now, but we're doing our due diligence on them. And until our due diligence is complete, we don't make the announcement or bring it back to the board for a vote to approve the funding for that. But if these properties are approved, they're going to be just as great as the ones we approved today. And a reporter asked me today a really interesting question. He says, well, what is your thought about whether these parks should be passive or they should have some sort of amenities put on them? And that's really up to the people who are going to use the parks. But what we are going to be doing is starting to put together master plans for each of the parks that'll involve discussions, engagement with the people who live around the parks to see how they want to use those parks. But I'm really optimistic and delighted about the acquisitions of the 5 parcels we've made so far. And I really appreciate those property owners working with the county to agree to sell us that land at the appraised value of the property. And I think that's really important to highlight because it's a really hot market in Cobb right now. The recession's over, building's back, and they could have, they perhaps could have gotten a little bit more money by selling it at the market value to some developer. But instead, they've created their own legacy by letting us buy the property at the appraised value, which is lower than the market value. And I want to commend them and thank them for their civic response to a very important program in our county. And I want them to know that we do not take their sacrifice lightly. We want to thank them.
And that seems to be the challenge. I've had people come up to me saying this particular property X would be ideal for a park, but it's not that easy. We're pretty much constrained with how much we can pay for it.
Yeah, that's, when we passed the parks bond last February, I believe, never in my mind that I thought it would be that hard to spend $27 million. But as you know, we started out with a list of about 160 some odd properties. We narrowed it down to 14. And then out of that 14, we went and did appraisals and made offers to the owners. But a lot of those owners, since they had allowed their properties to be considered as part of the parks property, have changed their mind and went and decided to go elsewhere with that property. So we've already had to expand the list from 14 and go back into the list of 160. And some of the properties we're seeing right now are from that expanded list. There are still some properties that are part of the original 14. But again, it is really important that we do our due diligence on this property. Because once we own the property, if something comes up that we hadn't thought about or hadn't looked at or inquired about, it's on us to pay for it, and that means it's going to come out of the general fund. So we got to be patient about this. It's a very measured program, but it requires, the board has done a good job of making sure that we do all the right things to make sure we're using the taxpayers' money correctly.
So more to come throughout the year on the parks.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I've had a chance to peek at your schedule for the first couple of months of 2018. You're going to be at a lot of different locations talking to a lot of different people, and that starts later this week.
It does. As we all know, the budget is going to be, for me anyhow, the most important issue that I have to deal with through the summer. And it is the culmination of the perfect storm. It isn't one thing that has led up to what we're advertising as a $30 million shortfall. It is a number of factors that have come into play this year. And I just want to be very, very candid about this. There are a lot of people who think that the Braves are the sole reason, our contribution to the Braves bond is the sole reason why we've gotten into this pickle. And the irony is all the payment to the Braves bond, it accelerated a process that was going to have to happen anyhow. We were always going to have to deal with this shortfall. But we have to deal with it now instead of later. And I've been put in this position to want to have to lead the board through our discussions with this. But I want to emphasize a couple things. First of all, we did have a board meeting, a retreat in October, where we openly talked about that, and everybody that wanted to come could see what we talked about. We have that board meeting, that retreat, has given 90% of the idea of how we're going to address the shortfall. The fees were a follow-on to that retreat, but the fees were always a player before the retreat because they were proposed in 2013. And for reasons that are lost in history, we didn't act on those fees, but I brought them forward as part of the overall review of the Citizens Oversight Committee. And the fees were not done overnight, but as I'm going to tell the people, particularly the seniors when I meet them over the next week, we could have done a better job of communicating what we were trying to do, how we were trying to do it, and why we were trying to do it. So, there's going to be an apology at the outset of all these meetings. Yes, I'm sorry, we could have done this better, but we're doing this now. And we have to, we have to work for today and tomorrow and try to find a way to reach common consensus because, one of the things I'll be taking to the board meetings is just give the seniors some general context, and I know you could probably have this on PDF, but there's some general context about the fees are part of a bigger universe that we have to pay. This is a pie chart for our 2018 budget and what we're buying with that money. And what the board did this year is it broke down the universe into a mandated, what the state and federal law requires us to do, essential, those services that are not mandated, but we couldn't do without them in this county without some sort of adverse impact, and then the famous desired, which are all the nice to haves. And what's happened right now is that if, because of the expenses that we knew about, that have now collectively come together to add up to $30 million and perhaps a little bit more, we have to find a way to pay for that. And one way to do that is to rob from Peter to pay Paul, and there are other venues like that. So the discussion with the seniors about their fees is just the start of a very long, probably 6-month process where I'm going to be getting out and engaging the voters and the citizens, telling them, here's where we are, here's what we're trying to do, and here's why we're asking for your support.
When I talked to the leaders over at Senior Services and we did some informational videos about it, the message from them was, we're not putting these fees out there to get money or to fleece the seniors.
Right.
We're trying to just keep these programs and facilities open at this
Well,
point.
we're trying to keep the senior centers open. That's the bottom line. Because again, there were a lot of reasons in the past why we could have done all these, provided funding for all these programs without these fees, but those days are over. And I just want to be very open about that. I wish it was otherwise, but you have to also accept good news and bad news equally. But the bottom line is we owe you the truth. And the truth is this board has turned over every single leaf. We have found over nearly $10 million, if not more, in savings and cost efficiencies, but that isn't going to solve the bigger problem. And we just have to step up to the plate here and ask the voters, okay, here's where we are right now. Here's how we got here. Here's how we want us to maintain this 5-star rating. But it's up to you. The reality is that for 50 years, we've had programs that the county has decided to fund using general fund money and other purposes. But this is 50 years later, and things are not cheap anymore. And it's like on your house. You buy a nice house, but after 10 or 15 years, you have to replace the heating and air conditioning unit. You have to replace the garage door opener. You have to repave the garage. A lot of things you have to do. And I know that there's the famous example of, well, the tax digest has gone up, but the reality is there's no direct proportion between the increase in tax digest and increased revenues on the general fund.
Right. One thing I learned from the budget retreat that we had was that our finance department, before the Braves Stadium came into existence, prepared a chart that showed that despite the tax digest going up, more
Right.
people are moving into the county,
Right.
our expenses are up, and as
Right.
you mentioned, we've had expenses building up, and that we were heading in this direction long
correct.
before the Braves was even a twinkle in anyone's eye.
That's correct. And something was going to finally, open up this door. And again, there are a lot of things that have forced this door to be pushed open, but the door is now open, and we have to deal with the issue. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. The process is a lot more laborious, but it's a true democracy. The board could sit up and have our meetings twice a month and make decisions and just go, have the public comment strictly from the 12 openings we have every every meeting for public comment, or we can do what I'm doing, which is get out there and give the voters more access to their comments. And I look forward to them being there.
When I've seen you talk to groups, two things that you say kind of resonate with me. One is the fact that when you look at your property tax bill, what you're actually sending to the general fund is a pretty darn small slice.
It's a small amount, yes. But I recognize also it's their money, all right? And they have a right to know how we're spending their money. Big or small, they have a right to know that. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily like the message sometimes. But as I tell people, now you know why you're upset, whereas before you just sort of thought you knew why you're upset. But again, I think the thing that I have seen is that when you get out there and show your side of the story, which is what we've not done very well in the past, but we're doing a lot better now, people finally understand what we're trying to do. And we get a lot more cooperation, people working with us on the issue. Again, it's probably a grumbling assent, but the bottom line is they know what they're getting in this county. It's a 5-star county, all right? You do not live anywhere better in Atlanta than you live in Cobb County. But quality does not come cheap. And my job is to get out there and show them what the true expense is for this 5-star quality county.
And the second thing that you've pointed out before, too, is when you compare us to our metro Atlanta contemporary counties, our millage rate is considerably lower.
Much lower, much lower.
Yeah. Well, we will have on our web page, also the Facebook page, and our other social media outlets, his itinerary for his town halls coming up. So we encourage you to sign up for his newsletter, go to our pages, see where he's going to be, and participate in those because the voices make a difference.
It does. It does. In this county and with this board, their voices do make a difference. We have changed our votes based on this new openness and expanding the public's access to their board.
All right, we hope to see you all out there. If not, continue to follow our chats here on our YouTube channel, Facebook, and other social media things. In the meantime, have a good day.
Yeah, thank you, Bros.